This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. An episode of Fins, Fur, and Feathers with K-State's Drew Ricketts and Joe Gerken starts the show as they discuss snakes and what people should do to reduce the chances of encountering one. Jeff Whitworth, K-State crop entomologist, keeps the show rolling as he talks about wasps, which ones are common in Kansas, and how people can control them. Ending the show is K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk as he looks at the history of ice cream in the U.S., as well as the most popular flavors, toppings, and pairings, as July is National Ice Cream Month. That and more is coming up ahead.
You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and I'm Chevy Lynn Vasky, and we start our Tuesday show with part of a Fins, Fur, and Feathers podcast episode from K-State's Drew Ricketts and Joe Gerken. Drew begins the conversation explaining what people who are snake-averse should do.
You know, the best thing to do if you're not someone who really likes snakes or someone who has good snake identification skills is really just to go the other way. Because almost all the time, not all the time, but most of the time, if we encounter a snake somewhere and we just go somewhere else and then come back in 30 minutes, that snake's going to be gone. And we don't have to worry about fooling with that snake. Really, the worst thing somebody can do is try and catch a snake that they haven't identified or that they're not extremely confident in that identification. And so, you know, what I typically tell folks, the best thing you can do for yourself from a snake safety standpoint is learn to identify at least our venomous species. And if you can tell for sure that that's not a venomous snake, maybe you don't know whether it's a western rat snake or, you know, a speckled king snake or something like that, then you still know it's non-venomous, and maybe you don't need to worry about it. The one venomous snake that we do have in Kansas that we didn't mention yet is the western diamondback. And there's snakes that look like all these that aren't venomous, and so that's a big challenge. You know, I get lots of pictures of what a lot of people will call a corn snake or a Great Plains rat snake. Folks think that they're either a Massasauga or a copperhead. We mentioned the water snakes. A diamondback water snake is a species that we have, and if you don't know what you're looking at, that one can be easy to mistake with a western diamondback. So,
well, it's probably, you know, if you're going to side on misidentification, I think misidentify it as something maybe you should leave alone, right?
Yeah.
Sounds like maybe that's just good advice in general. If you tend to leave them alone, don't pick them up, maybe your risk of getting bit declines quite a bit.
It does, yeah. Actually, 50% of the people who are bitten by venomous snakes in the United States every year were handling the snake.
Huh.
That's a statistic that always is mind-boggling to me. But, you know, in terms of avoiding snakes, let's go to our HER acronym that we like to use. So habitat modification, we can use that a lot. And I had never spent a lot of time working in the field around rattlesnakes. And the first time I walked up to a gate, you know, I just went stomping through the kochia and the old piled up kochia tree, and I had to stop and think about it a little bit. And so if you got to be out in heavy cover, you know you're in an area where there might be venomous snakes, you can poke around with a stick, you can pull the buggy up or the pickup up into those tall weeds before you get to the gate and then back up. And when you do that, that old rattlesnake will probably shake his tail, letting you know he's there. Then you know where he's at and if you can avoid him or not. But another thing we can do is try and limit the accumulation of those weeds. Limit if you've got a whole bunch of kochia or tumbleweeds or something that blows up against your fences right around your gates, go ahead and clean that out. That can be very helpful. Thinking specifically about avoiding rattlesnakes, you know, they like to either warm up or cool off depending on what they need. And concrete floors in shop buildings are great places to do that. And so, you know, try not to walk into a dark shop building if you're in rattlesnake country. So if you're cleaning up in an area, even if it's not an area where snakes might normally be, pay attention. Look before you grab.
Have you heard a rattlesnake rattle?
I have.
And how How loud is it? Is it something you're going to know? Is it you have to be listening for it, or is it loud enough to kind of know it's there?
I've got pretty poor hearing, and I can hear it pretty well.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, it's not a regular sound. It doesn't sound like the bugs that are going right now, the cicadas, or if we had, other sorts of critters moving around. It doesn't sound like leaf litter blowing. It's a very distinct sound, and I think the first time you hear it, you're going to know what it is.
Sure.
It tends to be pretty startling.
There's a lot of other species. What are some reasons that all these other snakes might be beneficial to have around?
Absolutely. I mean, it's mainly the stuff that they eat, the service that they provide us by just doing what they normally do. So we've got a couple of different species of rat snakes. We've got the gopher snake. Those are all species that are going to eat an incredible amount of rodents. And those are critters that can cause us problems for sure. The king snake that can eat other snakes, including venomous ones, and so those are good species to have around. And then pretty much all of them will eat some insect matter and that sort of thing. So they provide us a lot of services that way.
I'm kind of surprised to hear the insects. I mean, that makes sense for like a ringneck snake or something smaller, but sounds like some of the bigger snakes might eat a big grasshopper if it's in front of it.
Yeah, if they come across them, they sure will. And, like a garter snake can be a fairly good-sized snake, or a ribbon snake can be a fairly good-sized snake, and they're going to be more insect specialists. Thinking more about how to avoid encountering snakes, we talked about habitat modification around gates and that sort of stuff. But if somebody is extremely snake averse, if they don't want to be around snakes, if they really want to limit how many snakes they might encounter in a yard, limiting the amount of landscaping that we have that includes rocks that are layered piles of rocks, trying to limit taller vegetation in a yard can be important. So, and a lot of the things that might be taller vegetation could be weeds, but it could also be ornamental plants that we put out there. So if you really don't like snakes and you've had a lot of snakes in your yard and you also have, some big pampas grass or something like that, then maybe getting rid of that taller vegetation might be the thing to do. Rock piles, brush piles, any firewood piles, all of those things are going to be habitat for a snake. Open foundations, whether it's underneath a shed or an open crawl space under a house, open porches, all those spots are inviting homes for snakes. A common place that folks oftentimes will encounter snakes when they don't expect to, maybe, is in the water meter pit. Open up that water meter and there's a snake in there. That's the place I used to go look for them when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But I was one of those weirdos that wanted to see snakes. So, those are all examples of habitat modification outside. When snakes find their way into the home, it can be really challenging in older homes to try and seal them up well enough that snakes don't get out. If we think about a gap that a snake can get through, even a really large snake could get through a half-inch tall gap that's an inch or two wide.
Yeah.
They can squeeze through very small openings. So really sealing up, good seals underneath doors, good seals underneath garage doors, and those sorts of things. Any gaps between the foundation and the home, if we have a rock foundation, it may be almost entirely impossible to exclude snakes. So really tightening things up, sealing things up. If you have gaps, fill them with foam, mortar, those sorts of things. Exclusion, I guess the habitat modification and exclusion sort of go together with snakes. If you do frequently find snakes in the home, really the best way to try and get them out of the house and catch them once they come in. I know that a lot of people get squeamish when we talk about this, but the large glue traps, you can find them on Amazon, you can find them in home improvement stores, not the small glue traps like we use for mice, but the large ones that say that they're intended for snakes. And we can put those behind furniture in a home. Snakes tend to follow structure, and so when they get into a house, they're probably going to follow a wall. And if they hit that wall and then they hit the next wall and that wall goes behind a couch or something like that, then they'll find that glue trap there and it'll catch them. Just make sure you check them fairly often or you might get some stink in the house.
Yeah.
And that's good for keeping pets. If we've got cats in the house or dogs in the house, that keeps the pets from encountering those glue traps and having a problem there. Removal, if you do have snakes that get into a home or if you want to remove them from a yard, if you aren't incredibly competent at handling snakes, A good way to remove them alive would be to go ahead and buy yourself a set of snake tongs and learn how to use them appropriately. So you can get them with those snake tongs, put them down into a 5-gallon bucket, get the lid on there tight, and then you could take them somewhere else if you wanted to, or deal with that snake however you wish to.
So what should we do if we get bit? That's a good question.
Rushing to the hospital, seeking medical treatment as quickly as possible is the best thing that you can do. Don't try and cut the bite and suck out the venom. It is recommended that you seek medical attention as quickly as you can, and to keep the bite below the heart just to reduce the speed of circulating that venom. And it's rare for people to get bit by venomous snakes, but it does happen. And I think you're a good example. You still handle snakes, right? I mean, you're trained in it, but you know the difference between a venomous snake and a non-venomous snake, and you know why you got bit in that instance. And so you just got to be aware of what's going on and be careful, and don't handle snakes if you don't know what you're dealing with.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, just elaborate slightly, is you should go to get medical attention whether you think it's venomous or not,
Sure.
right? And so getting checked out and getting it cleaned up is probably always a good idea for sure.
Once again, that was K-State's Joe Gerken and Drew Ricketts with part of their Fins, Fur, and Feathers podcast episode. If you would like to listen to the full episode, you can do so by following the link in today's show notes on agtoday.net. By searching for Fins, Fur, and Feathers on your favorite podcast platform, or by going online to www.wildlife.k-state.edu. We're cutting to a short break now, but stick around because we have more for you ahead.
You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show talking about wasps with K-State crop entomologist Jeff Whitworth. Jeff, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure, anytime.
Jeff, what are the different categories of wasps, specifically in Kansas?
Well, that's a good question. There are lots of different types of wasps, different species. I have no idea how many, but there's really kind of 4 main categories of what we usually call nuisance wasps. There's 2 different species that are kind of social wasps, not in the sense of the honeybee exactly, but they live together in nests, and they construct these nests out of substances that look like paper. So there are the paper wasps that make their nests above ground, and there are the paper wasps that make their nests below ground. They're different species, but they do live in relatively large colonies, and by that I mean it depends on the time of the year. They generally start out, the females are the ones that overwinter. They come out in the spring as adult, and they'll start building up the colony. And then if it's a paper wasp on the outside of your house, generally if you knock it down in the winter, if it gets knocked down in the winter, the nest is knocked down in the fall or the winter and lays on the ground. Will they overwinter? Yeah, sure. It's just as if it was hanging up. It's not going to bother the developing female wasp inside or the adult wasp inside unless you run over it or burn it or willfully destroy it somehow. They are pretty good at surviving winters wherever their nests end up. We've even tried to drown them by putting nests in water, and those nests float, so you actually have to weight them down. Anyway, that's a long story. So they build these paper-looking nests, and usually it starts out with one female finds a good spot. She'll start hanging her nest, and then eventually, as the summer goes along and they produce more eggs and more wasps develop, that nest will expand till usually by the end of the summer you'll have 40 or 50 individuals. Those are the social wasps. The same thing happens underground, only you don't notice it. The underground paper nesting wasps, we call it, those are the ones you usually run into when you're out, landscaping, and you lift up a rock and there's a little nest under it, or there's a bale of hay been out there for a while and you lift that up and there's a wasp nest under it, or you're mowing and you come across a hole and you disturb that and all these wasps come out. Those are the paper wasps, and they're social wasps, and they're underground. The reason that's important is because they'll all come after you, just like a honeybee colony. If you disturb them, that first one initiates the alarm, and the rest of them will come after you also, just to protect the colony. Normally, they're very docile. They're very non-aggressive. But we always consider these wasps beneficial because what they're doing, those females, they can all sting. They all have stingers. Again, another difference between the wasps and the bees, the wasp female can sting multiple times. So if they come after you, they can just keep stinging you. A honeybee, the female honeybee has a stinger. The end is notched so that once they sting you, it pulls out the stinger. So that's it. That's a terminal situation for honeybees. Not so with the wasp. They can keep stinging you. That's why, if you do disrupt a colony or disturb a colony, there can be many of it after you get many stings. The female is out looking for food to put in the cells. If you've noticed those paper wasps, they look like they're made up of a whole bunch of little cells, I guess, I don't know what else you'd call it, but with little white caps on them. Inside each one of those, the female wasp has captured a little caterpillar or a cricket or a grasshopper and puts it in that cell, stings it so it's paralyzed. It's not dead, but it's paralyzed. And then she'll lay an egg. And then that egg will hatch, and that wasp will feed on that, whatever that food source is inside that little cell that female wasp has placed there. She'll cap it off, and that's it. She doesn't do any more care of the nest or anything like a honeybee, but they still can be quite a few female wasps actually bringing food back and forth to the nest site. So that's kind of the situation with our nests that they look like paper. We call them paper nests. The wasps that make those are more social. Then we have our solitary wasps. Included in that group are probably the most common that folks run into are the mud daubers. They make these, everybody's familiar with these little mud casings they produce, and there can be many of them in one location. Because of where they're located, the female wasp that's making these, they have to have a relatively close source of mud because they go back and forth making the mud, make the casing, and they do the same thing then as the social wasps do. They go out and look for a source of food, little baby little grasshopper, little cricket, little caterpillars of some sort, larvae of some sort. That's why we generally consider these wasps beneficial. Generally, they don't do enough to protect our crops or our gardens, but they still help because they're usually utilizing some pest as a food source. So the mud daubers, the female does the same thing, stings the food source that she's captured, brings it back, puts it in the mud cell, closes it up, and she's gone. That's solitary. She doesn't come back. She's not hanging around that mud nest. She's constructing others close by if she can until the source of the mud dries up, and then she has to go someplace else. So whenever those wasps hatch, they'll chew their way out of that little enclosure, that little mud enclosure, and they'll take off and go do the same thing. There can be 2 or 3 generations a year on any of these, but it's the paper wasps that generally are hanging around and build up in, 30 to 40 individuals that can all sting at any one time. The fourth category are the solitary wasps that dig a hole in the soil and nest in the soil. Probably the one that most folks are familiar with is the cicada killer, the big old yellow and black cicada killer we see. Anytime you have cicadas, you'll see these big wasps. They do the same thing. They sting a cicada and they grab it and they carry it back someplace to some sandy or soft soil area where they can dig a hole. They dig a hole and put that in the soil. That cicada is parasitized. They lay an egg, and then the cicada killer wasp will develop from that all year long. There's only one generation of those a year, so I have not seen any yet this year, but we're getting close to having cicadas and cicada killers out. So, again, they're very non-aggressive. All of these wasps are considered non-aggressive, but still they have stingers. They still, if they feel threatened or, if you get one in your shirt or in your hat, they can still sting. So keep that in mind.
If they are a problem, how do you kill them or take care of them?
That's a good question. That's the best way to control them is at night. Remember, these things are diurnal. They're active during the day. They're in their cells at night, or they're around the nest at night, or else they're not. They're out someplace else. But that's a good time to destroy the nest. Get rid of the nest. And if you have an insecticide, a lot of insecticides, general household insecticides, are registered for controlling wasps and bees and stuff like that. So destroy the nest, spray the area with an insecticide. The mud daubers, I always hear get rid of the mud, but sometimes they're coming from a pond or a creek or someplace like that. You can't always do that. But if there's no mud source available, they won't build those mud enclosures any place around. So the best way to do it is do it at night when they're not around or they're inside their cells, they're not active, and get rid of them. I mean, if you're worried about the ones in the ground, the paper wasps nesting under hay bales and stuff, again, go out at night, spray insecticide down the hole and cover the hole. It will kill all the wasps. You don't have anything to worry about. They're relatively easy to get rid of, but you want to make sure you do it, again, at night, or if you don't mind their presence, because remember, they're also catching spiders and worms and all kinds of stuff to help control those potential pests in your area. So you can wait till the fall when they're all overwintering, destroy them all. You won't have a problem. Again, maybe never till another wasp finds that location and decides that's a good site to build a nest. So control is not that difficult. It's just we always recommend trying to do it at night, whether it's in the ground or up on the side of your barn or your garage or whatever.
If someone accidentally ticks off a wasp nest, is there anything they can do?
Well, you can't outrun a wasp. Many kids try, but you can't. But remember, they can fly. If a wasp nest feels threatened and they all come out, yes, I would run, but you want to get behind something also so that they have no line of sight. The other thing, another point of contact between people and wasps is when you're out at a picnic. A lot of folks think wasps are attracted to soft drinks, and they are. And they're attracted to anything with sugar in it. So if you're out in the outside where there's wasps around, you have watermelon, cantaloupe, any fruit or soft drinks, they're attracted to that sugar actually in the liquid. So keep that in mind. If you're having problems with them, just put it in something or under something where they can't get to it. Really and truly, they're non-aggressive. I've only seen one time where they brought a young man into the emergency room that had probably 30 or 40 wasp stings on him because he had been up in a tree and there's a great big paper wasp nest. Been there for 2 or 3 years that they've been working on it. And he had many, many wasp stings, but he got over it okay.
Jeff, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime.
That was K-State crop entomologist Jeff Whitworth. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. We end today's program with this week's milk lines. Some recent studies confirm what we've all suspected: Americans love ice cream. In fact, only New Zealand consumes more ice cream than the U.S. July is National Ice Cream Month, and K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk takes a look at the history of ice cream, as well as some of the most popular flavors, toppings, and pairings.
Today, I'd like to encourage our Kansas dairy industry and our dairy consumers to celebrate July as Ice Cream Month. Back in 1984, it was President Ronald Reagan who signed a couple of documents that designated July as the National Ice Cream Month and the third Sunday of July as National Ice Cream Day. As you think about ice cream here in the United States, particularly here in the Midwest, it is a very important product that our consumers do consume. As you look at some national surveys that have been recently reported on, about 97% of Americans either like or love ice cream. So ice cream is a favorite dairy treat amongst our consumers. As you look at the history of ice cream here in the United States, we do have a rich history in ice cream. It seems that probably the first people that brought ice cream to the United States were the Quaker colonists as they opened ice cream shops in New York and other cities during the colonial era. Many of our presidents enjoyed ice cream. In fact, we have an ice cream recipe from President Thomas Jefferson. His favorite ice cream recipe for vanilla ice cream and how it was actually made is actually recorded and stored in our National Archives. And as you look at how ice cream affected the presidency in 1813, First Lady Dolly Madison served ice cream as part of the inaugural ball. So as we think about ice cream in the United States, it has been an important product that we produce within our dairy industry. And today, Americans consume the second largest amount of ice cream in the world, only second to New Zealand. We consume about 21 liters per year annually based on our population. In New Zealand, they consume about 28.4 liters, so just a little ahead of us. When you look at our industry as a whole, ice cream injects about $11.4 billion into the U.S. economy and creates over 27,000 jobs in the process. So as you think about ice cream, and you think about maybe having an ice cream party to celebrate Ice Cream Month, what are some trends that you might want to be aware of? When you look at the favorite ice creams across the United States, what are the favorites? Vanilla still wins out, according to consumers, at about 38%. Chocolate comes in second with about 32%, and strawberry about 25%. Coming close behind, we've got butter pecan and cookie dough, as well as cookies and cream. Mint chocolate chip is also preferred by about 20% of the people participating in the survey. So any of those flavors would probably work at an ice cream party that you might want to plan. As you look at toppings, what are the toppings that are most desired as you think about ice cream? Well, hot fudge still comes out on top at about 35% of those responding. Whipped cream, 29%, caramel sauce, 24%, and chocolate sauce by about 21%. So those are the favorite toppings. What if you're going to pair something with that ice cream party? What kind of sweet dessert do you want to provide? Well, brownies still come out on top, so still the favorite choice, followed by cake and cookies. If you're wondering about how to serve that ice cream, does it go in a bowl or does it go on a waffle cone? Well, actually, the waffle cone is preferred by about 29% of the respondents, and the bowl about 27%. So that may have an impact on whether or not you have toppings or something else to pair with it, depending on what type of service item you might be utilizing to hold that ice cream for your participants. As we think about our dairy industry, we do have many things to celebrate, and ice cream is one of the favorite things that we can celebrate during the summertime. Make sure you take advantage of July as the National Ice Cream Month and enjoy some ice cream with your family and friends as you celebrate our dairy industry. This is Mike Brouk with K-State Research and Extension.
Thanks, Mike. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.